Alrighty, we are back with Chapter 2 of Outlier by Lisa Beeson. Dun dun dun. Oh, hi, baby. Hi, sweetheart. There's my Snuckums. There's my little Annie girl. Hi, my baby girl. I love you. Mwah. That's my baby girl. Hi, beautiful. Oh, beautiful. Don't silly monkey. Okay, hop down. I'm working. Ish. Working-ish. Okie dokie. We left off of Chapter 1, where Ari was dream walking in Adam's dream, and told him that if he really wanted to help her, to go check on her family, make sure they're okay. Now we're at Chapter 2. Oh, but these pretty little babies. Oh, these pretty little babies. Oh, I love those. Oh, I love those. Oh, the babies. My honeys. Alrighty. As Ari opened her eyes, it took her a while to get her bearings. She was lying in a fancy old-fashioned canopy bed, still in the clothes she had on yesterday, and wrapped up in a super comfy quilt. Her cheeks were wet with tears that she had shed during her sleep, and there was a furry calico lump curled on top of her legs. As soon as the lump perceived she was awake, it uncurled and stretched, revealing itself to be a beautiful long-haired calico cat. They've been quiet while I'm sitting here playing my video games. Now I'm trying to actually do something. And that changes. As soon as the lump perceived she was awake, it uncurled and stretched, revealing itself to be a beautiful long-haired calico cat. It padded up to Ari's chest and laid back down sphinx-like and started purring loudly. "Well, hello," she said, as the cat stared back at her with its curious yellow eyes. Ari wiped at her wet cheeks with the back of her hands, trying hard not to think about how much she missed Adam and Jamie, and how stupid she had been lately. She absently scratched the cat's head and looked at Ruby's watch out of habit. It was 6 hours behind the clock on the bedside table, which said it was 11 a.m., and then the past 24 hours came back to her. They hadn't arrived in England until around 4 in the morning, since they had made a pit stop in Iceland. Unlike Cam, she hadn't been able to sleep on Kale's private jet as it took them across the Atlantic. Once she was away from everything and had some time to reflect, her mind was constantly churning over whether she had done the right thing by letting her family believe she was dead. The guilt she felt over the heart-wrenching torment they must have gone through pressed down on her like a lead weight on her chest and wouldn't let her rest. At the time, Ruby had insisted it was the right thing to do to protect them, so Ari had trusted that she knew what was best on blind faith. But now that she had time to think about it, Ari began questioning whether what she had done was right, or if she was a horrible, heartless person for leaving everyone who cared about her behind. She was beginning to feel like a natural disaster, leaving wreckage and heartache wherever she went. Ari felt as if, since the suits started chasing her, people, situations, and events had been swallowing her up like the undertow of a giant wave, pushing her out to the murky depths of a vast, mysterious ocean. No matter how hard she tried to take control and make the right choices, the current kept pushing her further and further away from the shore. To make matters worse, the farther Kale's jet flew away from everything she knew and loved, the more she felt like she was losing complete control of her fate. She really didn't know that much about Kale, so she could just be leading herself and Cam into even more danger. "What choice did I have?" she would think over and over again as she tried to reassure herself that the right choice was made. But in reality, what choice did they really have? It was either Kale or the suits, and Kale could give her answers and protection, or so he claimed. By the time they landed, she was out of it and finally passed out from exhaustion on the drive to Kale's place in the English countryside. After that, everything was kind of a blur. She just remembered being ushered upstairs and then plopping into this bed. The cat inched forward and started nuzzling her neck. Ari nuzzled back and held on gently to its soft, warm body. After Adam's dream and being so far from home, it was nice to feel some love and comfort, even if it was from a strange cat. "Thank you, kitty. I needed that," she whispered into its fur. Having had enough of cuddle time, the cat got off her chest and curled up at the end of the bed. Ari sat up and looked around the room at the vintage lavender and gold wallpaper that matched her bed curtains and comforter. Milky beams of overcast light filtered through the lace window curtains onto the faded oriental rug on the floor. She almost felt as if she had stepped back in time, since the room was filled with beautiful antique furniture, a chest of drawers, an armoire, a vanity, and there was even an old-fashioned roll-top writing desk and chair. There was a fireplace on the right side of the room that unfortunately didn't have a fire in it. Her thin southern blood wasn't used to the cooler English summers. Even though it was August, it felt more like a Georgia winter to her. Too bad all she had were summer clothes. She had to throw away her last pair of jeans that fit, since they were covered in blood from when she got shot. Reluctant to get out of the warm bed, she thought over everything she learned in Adam's dream. She still couldn't understand how Cass could have been wrong about somebody coming to Paradise Glades. If Cass hadn't sent that stupid note, I would have never left the Lennoxes and brought Cam to the attention of the Suits. But she also couldn't imagine never knowing Cam. He was family now, too. Speaking of which, Ari really hoped her new tracking trick wasn't something she could only do in dreams, so she decided to experiment. She closed her eyes and took a deep cleansing breath, just like she had in the dream. Then she stretched out her field of energy sensitivity to find Cam. He wasn't upstairs, so she stretched it out further, and then she actually found him. She was a bit surprised at how quickly she found him. There was someone else with him, but she didn't recognize that energy. He seemed content, though, so he must be okay. Wait, what? In the moment, she nearly passed over the realization that she could tell a person's emotional state by sensing their energy. Kind of like how she could read people's intentions when she looked into their eyes. This is awesome! Before she did anything else, she decided to see if the door adjacent to the fireplace was a bathroom. She required one immediately. Reluctantly getting out of bed, she padded over to the door and turned the antique crystal doorknob to find that it was indeed a bathroom. It was small but perfectly suited for her needs. Over the past couple weeks, she had to share a bathroom with 2 teenage boys, so having her own bathroom would be a welcomed luxury. It was also supplied with all the toiletries she would need, so that was a plus. After getting business done and taking a quick hot shower, she dried off and put on as many layers of clothing as she could. She reached out for Cam's energy again, and she quickly found him in the same area as he was before. After the initial search, finding him again was easy. She latched onto his energy and felt the magnetic pull. The door out to the hallway was already open a crack, most likely due to when her new kitty friend decided to join her last night. When it realized Ari was leaving, the cat promptly jumped off the bed and followed her out to the hallway. Ari hadn't needed to latch on, though, because she saw Cam's path coming from a room across the hall and a couple doors down from her own. She made her way down the hall, following Cam's path, and it led her to a highly polished dark wood staircase with ornately carved newel posts. She had to fight the temptation to slide down the sweeping banister. The place seemed more like a museum than a residential home, with the resplendent atmosphere and amazing paintings of pastoral scenes and portraits of people long dead on the walls. At the bottom of the stairs, Ari and the cat quickly walked across the black and white marble floor of the entrance hall, down another hallway to a short staircase. Walking down the stairs, she was reminded of movies she'd seen of old English mansions where the kitchen and the servants' quarters were in the basement, so the servants could remain unseen. The closer she got to Cam, the stronger the delicious smells of food became. Her stomach growled in anticipation of a feast, and it seemed that the cat had the same idea as it raced ahead, leading the way. They soon found themselves in a spacious kitchen, which was a mix of vintage decor and high-end appliances. The sun had managed to break through the clouds and shone through the high windows on the far wall, which warmed Ari up a bit. Cam sat on a long bench at a large scarred oak table, with his long shaggy hair tucked behind his ears and wearing some unfamiliar clothes that were too small for him. He was scarfing down a plate of food and talking to a pleasantly plump older woman who was standing at the stainless steel gas stove, cooking something that smelled wonderful. The cat let out an emphatic meow to announce their presence, and Cam glanced over and gave Ari a big smile. "Hey, there you are! I told her you'd find us if you smelled food," he teased. "Interesting fashion choice, Pipes," he said, chuckling at the 3 layers of t-shirts and shorts and knee-high athletic socks she was wearing. Ari smirked self-consciously and shrugged her shoulders. "I didn't have any warm clothes. I'm not used to English weather." The older woman turned from the stove and walked over to Ari with a kind smile. "It should warm up soon, love. We're having a cool summer this year, but the weatherman said that it should get up to 21 degrees by this afternoon," she said with a quaint English accent while cupping one of Ari's hands between hers. An English accent I totally butchered and will continue to butcher, and I do apologize. "I'm Gemma Meeks. I take care of the manor. Is there anything you need? Just ask." Ari glanced over at Cam and giggled at his confused face. 21 degrees Celsius, Cam. It's like 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Comprehension dawned on his face. "Oh, okay. That makes more sense." Ari turned back to Gemma and smiled. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am." "Well, aren't you the polite one?" "Just Gemma is fine, love," she said with a smile, and then looked at Ari quizzically. "Was your mother Middle Eastern? Or maybe Indian?" Taken aback by the abrupt turn of the conversation, Ari took a second to respond and heard Cam clearing his throat to disguise a laugh. I don't believe so. She's from another galaxy." "Oh, forgive me for my lack of tact. It's just your coloring is so remarkable. Your bright blue eyes are so striking against your darker complexion. It's quite a stunning combination." Ari just nodded uncomfortably and sat down on the bench next to Cam, who nudged her with his elbow and chuckled at her discomfort. "Here you are," Gemma said as she placed a plate full of toast, baked beans, fried eggs, and sausage in front of her. "Cam said you have a healthy appetite, but from the looks of you, I don't believe him. It's all right if you can't finish. I give all the leftovers to the dogs." "I really hope those dogs have another source of food other than Ari's leftovers," Cam said with a impish grin, "because if not, they'll most definitely starve." Ari was too busy horking down the food on her plate to say anything, but it wasn't like she could disagree. She did have the voracious appetite of a Viking horde. As she ate, the cat kept rubbing against her legs. "Looks like you made a friend," Cam observed, looking under the table. Ari gulped down the food in her mouth. "It's super sweet. It was laying on me when I woke up." Gemma looked under the table in mild surprise. "Why, that's Norma! I've never seen her take to someone so quickly. It took me a week just to get her to stay in the same room with me for more than 5 minutes." "Norma's an interesting name for a cat," Cam observed as he tried to pet her, but she expertly weaved around Ari's legs, evading his hand. "Well, in truth, I had named her Norman before I found out she was a girl. I found her invading the pantry during a nasty storm one night." Cam gave up on petting Norma and sat up excitedly. "That reminds me, this place has a freaking moat. It's like a mini castle. It's ridiculous. Kale must be like stupid rich if he considers this his country home," he said, using air quotes with his fingers. Gemma took his empty plate and a few other dirty dishes over to the industrial-sized sink. "It's more like a small lake than a moat, actually. The manor and the outbuildings are on 2 islands in the lake. The surrounding 300 acres belong to Mr. Kale as well. He may be, she balked for a moment, then used air quotes to mock Cam, stupid rich. But he and his family have done a lot of good restoring this property and other restoration projects in the village. And now here he is taking you two in. The man is a saint, she said, looking towards the heavens. Cam and Ari looked at each other with raised eyebrows and confused looks. Gemma's description did not match up with the Kale that they knew. The man that had stalked her across the country to steal the stones she found, and then blackmailed her into helping him find more. Granted, he saved her life by getting her and Cam away from the suits, removed a bullet from her back, stitched her up, then gave her a healing rune that replenished all the blood she lost. But he had only done all those things for his own selfish reasons. She had to practically threaten him into taking Cam with him, instead of leaving him behind for the suits. Not exactly saintly behavior in her book. Cam mouthed the words, family? Questioningly. Ari shrugged her shoulders. Cale had never mentioned if he had any family or not. According to him, he was from another galaxy and arrived here against his will back in 1948, and only aged about 1 year for every 10 human years, unless he had some crossbred love children stashed away somewhere. His family restored this place? Ari asked as she got up to put more food on her plate. His uncle bought the property back in the early 70s. The place was falling apart, but he restored the manor and the grounds to their former glory. My family had been servants here at Artemira for generations, so he allowed my son and me to live here, rent and utilities free, as long as I took care of the place and had it ready for him whenever he or someone he invited here arrived, which was infrequent enough. In the long run, it turned out for the best, since it allowed me enough time to learn how to become a decent cook. When his uncle tragically passed away about 15 years ago, Mr. Kale took over and continued the arrangement. I have to say, except for all those tattoos and the clean-shaven face, he is the very image of his uncle. It's uncanny, she said with a dreamy look in her eyes. Cam and Ari shared another look. Speaking of Mr. Kale, Ari said as she slathered some butter on the last piece of toast and then sat back down at the table. Where is he? Gemma dried her hands and came back over to the table. He left a couple hours ago. Said he had some things to take care of, but he'd be back in a day or so. Both Cam and Ari looked at her incredulously. He left us? Cam asked. Kale promised to protect them from the suits, who have been able to infiltrate various international government agencies, presumably in England as well. Now the first chance he gets, he ditches them to fend for themselves? Thanks a lot, Kale. Well, you're not exactly alone, dear. There's myself and Connor Murphy, the groundskeeper. He lives in the gatehouse on the first island. She paused for a quick second. And then there's that Mr. Tober feller, patrolling about the property, Gemma said in a placating tone. Ari hadn't met the groundskeeper yet, but she had met Tober. He was a taciturn bulldog of a man who nobody in their right mind would want to mess with, which made her feel a bit better. Mr. Kale told me about how he was able to get you two away from an abusive situation, Gemma said, gently patting Cam's hand and trying not to look at his black eye, which, ironically enough, he got from Kale backhanding him. Not to worry, you're safe here with us. Cam was about to reply with a smart-aleck remark, most likely about how Kale was the abusive situation, but Ari kicked him under the table before anything came out. Thank you, Gemma. We really appreciate your hospitality, she said genuinely. Ari could tell Gemma was a good person. Her intentions were well-meaning and sincere, but she was also fiercely loyal to Kale, and it would not earn them any points if they badmouthed him. Ari also had a sneaking suspicion that Gemma may have had a crush on 1970s Kale, which was kind of weird to think about since she had to be at least 60 now, and Kale still looked like he was in his late 30s. Gemma smiled benevolently at them. It's my pleasure, love. When you two are ready, I can give you a tour of the place. Then she turned back to the sink and continued cleaning up the dishes from brunch. When she was back at the sink, Cam leaned in close to Ari and whispered, We have got to find a picture of Kale from the 70s. I bet he rocked the polyester and had an epic mustache. Ari smiled at the mental picture and nodded. Probably. Then she pointed at Cam's outfit with the end of her fork. Speaking of dated clothing, where'd you find that sweet outfit? Cam looked down at the old rugby-style shirt whose sleeves didn't quite reach his wrists, and the snug pair of high-water acid-wash jeans. They're her son Jared's old clothes. She said I could wear them till Kale gets me some of my own. She also said you could borrow some of her clothes if you needed to, he said with a devilish smirk. Ari looked over at the plump older woman, who was at least 2 or 3 inches shorter than her. That would be great, she said, trying not to sound too sarcastic in case Gemma could hear them. She didn't want to seem ungrateful, but there was no way she would fit in Gemma's clothes. Cam chuckled as she got up to give Gemma her empty plate. Thanks for the meal, Gemma. Thanks for the meal, Gemma. It was delicious. Gemma looked at the plate that was practically licked clean. Cam wasn't kidding, was he? Where do you put it all? She said, looking at Ari's lithe frame. Ari just shrugged self-consciously and changed the subject. Please don't feel like you have to wait on us. We're pretty self-sufficient, she said, and then looked over at Cam, who was currently picking at his teeth with his thumbnail, and she thought about the rancid condition of the apartment he had shared with Leo above Hawk's store before she got there. Well, at least I am. Gemma chuckled as she put the newly washed plate to dry on the dish rack. No worries. I don't mind it a bit. I haven't had anyone to fuss over in a long time. Cam stood up from the table. Can we go on that tour now? Absolutely, she replied as she turned the faucet off and quickly dried her hands with the towel sitting by the sink. Whew, I need a drink of water. Hold on. It is hot. Gemma gave them a whirlwind tour of the manor, her short legs striding confidently through the rooms while she threw out bits of history as she went. She told them that the first owners started building the original fortified house in 1137. It had been destroyed and rebuilt many times throughout the ages, and changed hands almost just as many. This resulted in a patchwork of different architectural styles. Traces of Tudor, Elizabethan, and Victorian design could still be seen throughout the building. Noisy bird. She led them through the beautiful dining room with priceless antique tapestries of ladies with unicorns. Then they passed through the drawing room with more antique paintings and other various pieces of art and collectibles, into the music room that boasted a beautiful grand piano that Ari planned to take full advantage of. Then they walked past the conservatory that looked out over an impressive English garden and the lake moat that surrounded the manor. Gemma then took them across the entry hall, past Kale's study, and the gym that was the former ballroom, to what would become Ari's favorite room in the house, the library. 2 stories of wall-to-wall books, sliding ladders, diamond-paned, and leaded-stained glass windows. Ugh, I messed that up. 2 stories of wall-to-wall books, sliding ladders, diamond-paned and leaded stained glass windows with scenes of ancient battles on land and sea, and comfy-looking chairs and a couch in front of a large fireplace. Ari was in heaven. Cam went past the ivory and ebony chess set to the large antique globe set in a wooden stand. As Ari ran up the wrought iron spiral staircase to the upper level. This is insane, Ari marveled as she walked along the upper stacks, reverently running her fingers over the spines of the books. Where did he get all of these? Some came with the house, but Mr. Kale and his uncle collected the rest. Mr. Kale inherited his uncle's love of history. In fact, that love of history inspired my Jared as well. He used to spend hours in here, devouring book after book. Now he's a library assistant for the Bodleian Library at Oxford, Gemma said, beaming with pride. When they were done exploring the library, Gemma took them back towards the entrance hall to the bottom of the grand staircase. Upstairs to the left is where your rooms are. There's a room at the end of the corridor that used to be the nursery. Jared turned it into a sort of lounge room, so there are movies and games in there for you. Cam and Ari nodded at each other in appreciation. Mr. Kale's private rooms are to the right. He values his privacy, so it'd be best if you stay out of that wing, Gemma explained. Done, Cam said definitively, as though the thought of it was distasteful. Lovely. Gemma nodded and turned back towards the kitchen. Where's your room, Gemma? Ari asked as they made their way down the stairs to the basement. Down here in the old servants' quarters, she answered. Jared and I used to be up in the left wing, but after I went off to college, Mr. Kale renovated the space into a very nice apartment for me. She grabbed a grey knitted cardigan covered in multicolored flowers for Ari, and then herded them into the mudroom off the pantry. Find a pair of wellies that fit. It rained yesterday and the grounds are still a bit soggy. Ari slipped on the ill-fitting cardigan and found a pair of rubber boots that fit sufficiently. When they were ready, Cam and Ari looked at each other and laughed at how ridiculous they looked. Gemma took them outside, past the small kitchen garden, towards the back of the building. They passed through some old ruins of the manor that never got rebuilt, and were now a part of the beautiful English garden. There were a myriad of different plants, trees, and flowering bushes. A shot of homesickness ran through her, making her miss her mom fiercely, knowing she would have loved it here. Ari tried to focus on what Gemma was saying to distract her from the pain in her heart. Throughout the years, the owners of Outlier have brought back various species of plants from all over the world. There are photographs from the early 1900s of the conservatory filled with all kinds of exotic plants and birds. Connor has done a brilliant job taking care of everything. Ever so often I can convince Mr. Kale to open up the gardens in the spring for the people in the village to come take tours of the grounds. And believe me, it's something to see, she said proudly. So, only you and the groundskeeper take care of everything? Ari asked, taking in the picturesque garden as they walked the gravel path that meandered through it. Every so often a moss-covered statue could be seen peeking out amongst the foliage, grabbing her attention. For the most part, Gemma answered, but we bring in people from the village when the need calls for it. I kind of passed out on the drive over from the airport. Where are we exactly? Ari asked. Oh, you missed it, Pipes. Tober let me sit up front, and it was the weirdest thing sitting on the driver's side and not be the one driving, Cam said as he shuffled along beside her. And man, Tober must have been a Formula One driver in a former life or something. The way he flew down those back roads was so awesome. I want that guy to teach me to drive, he said with a big grin on his face. Gemma stopped by some tall spires of hollyhocks and looked towards the east. We're about 5 kilometers outside the village of Covington Cross and about 20 kilometers northwest of Hastings. Ari had never heard of Covington Cross, but she did know that Hastings was on the southeastern corner of England, right on the English Channel, so she was able to get a basic idea of where they were. Gemma brought them back around to the front of the manor and down the cobbled driveway to the short bridge that connected the two islands. Mr. Tober is staying in the apartment over the garage. That used to be the old stables, she said, pointing to the large building on the left of the small island as they crossed the bridge. Wow, that place is huge. How many cars does he have? Cam asked. Enough, Gemma said matter-of-factly. Where's Reed? Ari asked. Gemma hadn't mentioned him being here, and she hadn't seen any sign of the large, gregarious Scotsman that had flown the jet over here. He was kind of hard to miss. He's with Mr. Kale. He usually stays in one of the rooms above the garage as well. As soon as the three of them passed the small line of trees that flanked the end of the bridge, they heard a cacophony of barking coming towards their direction. Both Cam and Ari tensed, but Gemma stood there unfazed. Don't mind them, loves. It's just Connor's dogs. They help keep watch over the grounds, she said as 4 huge dogs came into view, running straight for them, not looking very friendly. Without thinking, Ari stepped in front of Cam, and contrary to the fear pumping through her veins, she tried to emit calmness and reassurance towards the dogs, so they would see them as friends and not enemies. Cam tried to push her behind him, but she stayed strong, and the dogs slowed down to a trot before a high-pitched whistle pierced through the barking, causing 3 of the dogs to abruptly sit at silent attention, The fourth one, that looked like a bloodhound lab mix, was trying to sit still, but kept fidgeting excitedly with its tongue hanging out, seemingly just happy to be included in the commotion. A tall, lanky man came jogging up behind the dogs, looking apologetic. Ari assumed it was the groundskeeper, Connor Murphy. "Sorry about that, Gemma. They smelled strangers and got a bit excited," he said with a slight Irish lilt to his voice. Well, I'm just going to butcher all of these accents. "Excited?" Cam asked incredulously. "They looked like they were going to tear us apart." "Only if I let them," Connor quipped with a wink. Ari wasn't sure if Connor was joking or just stating a fact, but he seemed friendly enough. And he did just stop the dogs from tearing us apart, so there's that. Connor was a couple inches taller than Cam, with dark brown hair and a pale Irish complexion. Ari guessed he was in his mid-30s or so. Gemma stepped up beside Ari and put a friendly hand on her shoulder. "Connor, these are Mr. Cale's new wards, Ari and Cam." Connor stepped forward and shook their hands. He had a strong, calloused hand of a worker, and when Ari checked his intentions, she only got good vibes from him. "Once they get to know you, the dogs won't bother you anymore. Come and let them get your scent," he said, motioning them over to the sitting dogs. Cam and Ari cautiously walked over and let each dog smell their hands as Connor introduced the dogs, starting with the brindled mastiff on the far left. "This is Saxon," he said, rubbing the dog's massive cranium affectionately. "The German Shepherd is Kaiser, the Pointer is Adrian, and the one at the end, that," he said, pointing to the bloodhound lab mix who was currently trying to bite his own floppy ear, "that's Dennis." Hearing his name, Dennis looked at his master expectantly, with an adorably stupid grin on his face and his tail wagging happily. A big smile spread across Cam's face. "I know which one's my favorite," he said, kneeling in front of Dennis, rubbing his floppy ears fondly. Dennis, absolutely loving the attention, sniffed excitedly at Cam and started licking his face. Cam laughed as the dog pushed him onto his back, and they started wrestling in the grass. The other dogs sat obediently by their master's side, but Ari could tell they wanted to join in the ruckus, so she gave each of their heads a little rub of affection and tried not to think about how much she missed her old dog, Roosevelt. "I do believe we are witnessing the beginning of a beautiful friendship," Gemma said, smiling and shaking her head at Cam and Dennis, who were starting to chase each other in a frenetic game of tag. Connor nodded in agreement and then leaned in towards Gemma. "Please don't tell me those clothes are back in style," he said, indicating Cam's ill-fitting outfit. Gemma chuckled. "Oh, no, the poor boy didn't have any clothes except the ones he came in, so I let him borrow some of Jared's old clothes. Granted, they're not the best fit, but they're better than nothing." Connor let out a huff of laughter, then looked over at Ari. "And what's your excuse, princess?" he asked with a wink. I was just cold," she answered self-consciously, sticking her hands in the cardigan pockets and looking down at her feet. "Oh, leave her alone, Connor," Gemma said while half-heartedly swatting at him. "Will you join us for supper? I'm cooking a roast." Connor smiled and patted his stomach. "I don't think I'll be able to pass that up." "Good. See you at 7, she said, looking pleased. Connor nodded and then whistled for Dennis, who stopped what he was doing and happily followed his master and the other dogs. Cam brushed himself off and wiped his face with his sleeve. "That is the best dog ever," he said with a big grin. And that is the end of Chapter 2 of Outlier by Lisa Beeson. Woohoo! We made it through, and relatively painlessly. We didn't even have much crackling going on. What's up with that? What's up with that? What's up with that? Alright. That was a bit odd. I apologize. I got in a mood. I felt like I needed to do it. Just do it, you know? I guess I should look at the... Is it better if I look over here at the camera? Is this better? Okay, I better end this before I get even more weird. I don't know what I'm going to do once I end this. Maybe I'll go on to chapter 3. Maybe not. I've only got limited battery, so kind of swapping around what kind of tasks I'm doing. But thank you for joining us for chapter 2 of Outlier. Next will be chapter 3, because that's how numbers work. Yay. Peace.